প্ৰিয় দৰ্শক, হাইস্কুল আৰু হাই ছেকেণ্ডেৰী টেটৰ লগত জড়িত পেডাগজিৰ কিছুমান প্ৰশ্ন এই ভিডিঅ'টিত ডিছকাছ কৰিম। পেডাগজি বিষয়ৰ এটি গুৰুত্বপূৰ্ণ অংশ ইনক্লুচিভ এডুকেশ্যন। ইয়াৰ বিষয়ে এই ভিডিঅ'টিত মই MCQs ডিছকাছ কৰিম। আশা কৰোঁ এই ভিডিঅ'টিৰ দ্বাৰা আপোনালোকৰ যদি কিবা ইনক্লুচিভ এডুকেশ্যনৰ লগত জানিবলগীয়া আছে নতুন কথা, সেয়া আপোনালোকে জানিব পাৰিব। আৰম্ভ কৰোঁ। হোৱাট ইজ ইনক্লুচিভ এডুকেশ্যন? ইনক্লুচিভ এডুকেশ্যন হয় কি? এডুকেশ্যন ফৰ অনলি ষ্টুডেণ্টছ উইথ ডিজেবিলিটিছ নে এডুকেশ্যন ডেট এক্সক্লুড ষ্টুডেণ্টছ উইথ স্পেচিয়েল নিডছ নে এডুকেশ্যন ডেট একমডেটছ অল লাৰ্ণাৰ্ছ ৰিগাৰ্ডলেছ অফ দেয়াৰ এবিলিটিছ নে এডুকেশ্যন অনলি ফৰ গিফটেড ষ্টুডেণ্টছ? কি হ'ব? শুদ্ধ উত্তৰ হ'ব এডুকেশ্যন ডেট একমডেটছ অল লাৰ্ণাৰ্ছ ৰিগাৰ্ডলেছ অফ দেয়াৰ এবিলিটিছ, য'ত সকলো লাৰ্ণাৰসকলক একত্ৰিত কৰা হয় তেওঁলোকৰ সমৰ্থ যিয়ে নহওক কিয়। নেক্সট, which of the following is a key principle of inclusive education? তলৰ কোনটো ইনক্লুচিভ এডুকেশ্যনৰ এটি মুখ্য নীতি হয়? Segregation of students with disabilities, equal access to learning opportunities for all students, providing separate curriculum for students with disabilities, limiting resources to students with special needs. শুদ্ধ উত্তৰ হ'ব equal access to learning opportunities for all students. Next, the goal of inclusive education is to what? Inclusive educationৰ মুখ্য লক্ষ্য কি? Provide special schools for students with disabilities, integrate all students into mainstream classrooms, create a barrier-free and supportive learning environment, focus only on academic excellence. শুদ্ধ উত্তৰ create a barrier-free and supportive learning environment. Next, what does the term Universal Design for Learning UDL refer to? Universal Design for Learning এ কি বুজায়? Designing education for only students with disabilities, adapting teaching methods to fit only high-performing students, নে creating flexible learning environments that accommodate diverse learning needs, নে developing a single standard curriculum for all? শুদ্ধ উত্তৰ creating flexible learning environments that accommodate diverse learning needs. Next, which of the following acts promotes inclusive education in India? তলৰ কোনটো এক্টে ভাৰতবৰ্ষত ইনক্লুচিভ এডুকেশ্যনক প্ৰমোট কৰে? The Right to Education Act 2009, the Disabilities Act 1995, the Rehabilitation Act 1973, the National Education Policy 2020. শুদ্ধ উত্তৰ The Right to Education Act 2009. Next, what role does an inclusive teacher play? Inclusive teacher-এ কি ভূমিকা লয়? Ensuring that only students with similar abilities are grouped together using differentiated instruction to meet the needs of all students, focusing only on the average performing students, encouraging students to work independently without interaction. শুদ্ধ উত্তৰ using differentiated instruction to meet the needs of all students. Next, which of the following is not a barrier to inclusive education? তলৰ কোনটো inclusive educationৰ barrier নহয়? Lack of teacher training, positive attitude toward diversity, inaccessible infrastructure, negative societal attitudes. শুদ্ধ উত্তৰ হ'ব positive attitude toward diversity. Next, what is the primary benefit of inclusive education? Inclusive educationৰ primary লাভ কি হয়? Increase competition among students, improved learning outcomes for only high achieving students, development of empathy, collaboration, and mutual respect, নে reducing the diversity of the classroom? শুদ্ধ উত্তৰ হ'ব development of empathy, collaboration, and mutual respect. Next, in an inclusive classroom, the role of assistive technology is to what? যদি আমি ইনক্লুজিভ ক্লাছৰুমৰ প্ৰসংগত কথা কওঁ তেতিয়াহ'লে এছিষ্টিভ টেকন'লজিৰ ভূমিকা কি হয়? Provide exclusive tools for students with disabilities only, replace the need for teachers, support diverse learners in accessing the curriculum, focus solely on physical disabilities. শুদ্ধ উত্তৰ support diverse learners in accessing the curriculum. Next, which strategy best promotes inclusivity in a classroom? তলৰ কোনটো strategy বা কৌশলে inclusivity classroomত বহুত বেছি promote কৰে? Streaming students by ability, encouraging peer tutoring and collaborative learning, setting rigid expectations for all students, using a standardized teaching approach for everyone. শুদ্ধ উত্তৰ encouraging peer tutoring and collaborative learning. Next, the concept of inclusive education is based on which principle? Inclusive education is a concept. এইটো তলৰ কোনটো নীতিৰ আধাৰত সৃষ্টি হোৱা? Equality and equity in education, segregation of students based on abilities, exclusive education for gifted learners, uniformity in curriculum delivery. শুদ্ধ উত্তৰ equality and equity in education. Next, which of the following best describes the philosophy of inclusive education? তলৰ কোনটোৱে inclusive educationৰ philosophy ধুনীয়াকৈ বৰ্ণনা কৰিছে? Teaching methods should be the same for all students. Education should cater to the needs of diverse learners in one system. Special education should replace mainstream education. Only students with disabilities need support in schools. শুদ্ধ উত্তৰ education should cater to the needs of diverse learners in one system. Next, who introduced the concept of least restrictive environment in education? তলৰ কোনজনে এই কনসেপ্টক ডেভেলপ কৰিছে? কনসেপ্টৰ নাম least restrictive environment in education. John Dewey, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act IDEA, Lev Vygotsky, Jean Piaget. শুদ্ধ উত্তৰ Individuals with Disabilities Education Act IDEA. Next, what does inclusion mean in the context of education? যদি আমি এডুকেশ্যনৰ প্ৰসংগত কথা কওঁ ইনক্লুজনে কি বুজায়? Placing all students in the same classroom without support, providing a supportive environment that meets diverse needs, segregating students with special needs into special schools, focusing only on academic achievements. শুদ্ধ উত্তৰ providing a supportive environment that meets diverse needs. Next, the Salamanca Statement 1994 emphasized what? Salamanca Statement যেটো 1994ত আহিছিল এটো কিহত গুৰুত্ব দিয়ে? Segregated education for children with disabilities, mainstreaming students with disabilities only if they excel, নে education as a fundamental right for all irrespective of disabilities, নে prioritizing gifted education over inclusive systems. শুদ্ধ উত্তৰ হ'ব education as a fundamental right for all irrespective of disabilities. Next, which theoretical framework is most associated with inclusive education? তলৰ কোনটো theoretical framework inclusive educationৰ লগত খুব বেছিকৈ জড়িত? Behaviorism, social constructivism, psychoanalysis, classical conditioning. শুদ্ধ উত্তৰ social constructivism. Next, in the context of inclusive education, equity refers to what? Inclusive educationৰ প্ৰসংগত equity কি বুজায়? Providing the same resources to all students, ensuring all students receive what they need to succeed, treating all students exactly the same, eliminating diversity in the classroom, Huddha Uttar, ensuring all students receive what they need to succeed. Next, the concept of inclusive education supports the idea of what? Inclusive education is a concept. Eto ki idea mane support kore. Viewing diversity as a resource, not a challenge, focusing only on students with special needs, teaching through a fixed and uniform curriculum, limiting classroom participation for students with disabilities. Huddha Uttar, viewing diversity as a resource, not a challenge. Next, which international declaration promotes inclusive education? তলৰ কোনটো ইণ্টাৰনেশ্যনেল ডিক্লেৰেশ্যনে ইনক্লুচিভ এডুকেশ্যনক প্ৰমোট কৰে? ইউনিভাৰ্চেল ডিক্লেৰেশ্যন অফ হিউমেন ৰাইটছ 948, ডাকাৰ ফ্ৰেমৱৰ্ক ফৰ একশ্যন 2000, সালামানকা ষ্টেটমেণ্ট 94, কিয়োটো প্ৰট'কল 1997. শুদ্ধ উত্তৰ সালামানকা ষ্টেটমেণ্ট 1994. Next, what is the role of teachers in inclusive education? Inclusive educationত শিক্ষকৰ ভূমিকা কি থাকে? To implement differentiated instruction tailored to each student's needs, to focus solely on high achieving students, to create a uniform learning environment for all students, to prioritize students without disabilities. Huddha Uttar, to implement differentiated instruction tailored to each student's needs. Next, what does differentiated instruction mean in the context of inclusive education? Inclusive educational প্ৰসংগত differentiated instruction কি বুজায়? Teaching all students using the same methods, adapting teaching strategies to meet the diverse needs of learners, segregating students based on their abilities, providing extra resources only to students with disabilities. শুদ্ধ উত্তৰ হ'ব adapting teaching strategies to meet the diverse needs of learners. Next, the term Universal Design for Learning UDL in short is associated with what? Universal Design for Learning কিহৰ লগত জড়িত? A fixed curriculum for all students, designing flexible learning environments to accommodate all learners, creating separate learning tracks for students with disabilities, standardized testing for inclusive education. Huddha Uttar B. Designing flexible learning environments to accommodate all learners. Next, what is the meaning of least restrictive environment? Least restrictive environment LREৰ meaningটো কি? Providing education to students with disabilities in separate classrooms, integrating students with special needs into mainstream classrooms as much as possible, restricting access to mainstream education for students with special needs, limiting social interactions between students. Huddha Uttar, integrating students with special needs into mainstream classrooms as much as possible. Next, the term Individualized Education Program IEP refers to what? কি বুজায়? A general plan for all students in a school, a personalized plan designed to meet the specific needs of a student with disabilities, a program for gifted students only, a curriculum designed for physical education. শুদ্ধ উত্তৰ হ'ব a personalized plan designed to meet the specific needs of a student with disabilities. Next, what does the term inclusion signify in education? Is a term inclusion শিক্ষাৰ ক্ষেত্ৰত কি বুজায়? Exclusively focusing on students with disabilities, segregating students based on their academic abilities, educating all students together in a supportive environment, providing a different syllabus for every student. Huddha Uttar, educating all students together in a supportive environment. Next, the term equity in inclusive education refers to what? Inclusive educationৰ ক্ষেত্ৰত educationে কি বুজায়? Treating every student in the same way, providing equal resources to all students regardless of their needs, ensuring all students receive the support they need to succeed, focusing only on students with disabilities, Huddha Uttar, ensuring all students receive the support they need to succeed. Next, assistive technology in inclusive education means what? Assistive technology inclusive educational প্ৰসংগত কি বুজায়? Gadgets designed for entertainment purposes, technology used to assist teachers in administrative work, tools and resources used to support students with disabilities in learning, advanced technology used only in special education schools. Huddha Uttar, tools and resources used to support students with disabilities in learning. Next, what does barrier-free environment refer to in inclusive education? Barrier-free environment ki bujhai? Schools without any restrictions for students, physical, social and cultural accessibility for all students, schools with no rules or regulations, separate environments for students with disabilities. Huddha Uttar, physical, social and cultural accessibility for all students. Next, the term mainstreaming refers to what? Mainstreaming a শব্দই কি বুজায়? Removing students with special needs from general classrooms, placing students with disabilities in regular classrooms with minimal support, integrating students with disabilities into regular classrooms with proper accommodations, creating separate schools for students with disabilities. Huddha Uttar, integrating students with disabilities into regular classrooms with proper accommodations. Next, what is multi-sensory learning? Multi-sensory learning to ki hoy? Teaching that uses only visual aids, an approach that engages multiple senses like sight, sound and touch, a teaching method restricted to auditory learners, learning through one dominant sensory channel. Huddha Uttar, an approach that engages multiple senses like sight, sound and touch. Next, who is known as the father of inclusive education? Father of inclusive education বুলি কাক কোৱা হয়? John Dewey, Frederick Froebel. It doesn't have a single founder, it evolved through collective efforts. Lev Vygotsky. Huddha Uttar, it doesn't have a single founder, it evolved through collective efforts. Next, who is considered the proponent of zone of proximal development, which underpins social constructivism in inclusive education? G. Piaget, Lev Vygotsky, B.F. Skinner, Howard Gardner. Huddha Uttar, Lev Vygotsky. Next, who introduced the concept of universal design for learning in education? Kune anisile? David H. Ross, John Dewey, Howard Gardner, Maria Montessori. David H. Ross. Next, the multiple intelligence theory, which promotes the idea of catering to diverse learners in an inclusive classroom, was proposed by whom? Kune onaitu? Lev Vygotsky, Howard Gardner, B.F. Skinner, Paulo Freire. Huddha Uttar, Howard Gardner. The proponent of experiential learning, which supports inclusivity by emphasizing learning through experiences, is what? Kune etu anisile? Ji inclusivity support kore experiential learning. David Kolb, G. Piaget, Albert Bandura, Erik Erikson. David Kolb. Next, who is associated with the development of the ecological systems theory relevant to understanding the environmental context of inclusive education? Ecological system theory kune ona jitu inclusive educationor মানে প্ৰসংগত বহুত সহায় হয়? Bronfenbrenner, Lev Vygotsky, John Dewey, Jerome Bruner. Bronfenbrenner. Next, who is often referred to as the father of modern education and influenced the philosophy of inclusive education? কাক কোৱা হয় father of modern education বুলি? Frederick Froebel, Piaget, Dewey ne Montessori. Huddha Uttar, Dewey. Next, the concept of differentiated instruction was popularized by whom? Differentiated instruction kune popular korisil? Carroll and Tomlinson, Howard Gardner, Maria Montessori, Lev Vygotsky. Carroll and Tomlinson. Next, who developed the idea of scaffolding, which is widely applied in inclusive education by teaching? Lev Vygotsky, Jerome Bruner, B.F. Skinner, G. Piaget, Jerome Bruner. Huddha Uttar. The proponent of the pedagogy of the oppressed, emphasizing education as a tool for liberation and inclusion. কাক কোনে পেডাগজি অফ দ্য অপ্ৰেছ এই কনচেপ্টটো আনিছিলে যাৰ দ্বাৰা লিবাৰেশ্যন মানে শিক্ষাক এটা লিবাৰেশ্যনৰ টুল বা ইনক্লুজনৰ টুল হিচাপে ব্যৱহাৰ কৰা হয় পল ফ্ৰেৰী এলবাৰ্ট বান্দুৰা লেভ য়স্কি জন ডিভি শুদ্ধ উত্তৰ পল ফ্ৰেৰী নেক্সট ইন উইচ ইয়েৰ ৱাজ দ্য সালামাঙ্কা ষ্টেটমেণ্ট অন ইনক্লুজিভ এডুকেশ্যন এডপ্টেড 96, 1994, 2000 শুদ্ধ উত্তৰ 1994 The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act IDEA কেতিয়া আনা হৈছিল 1965, 75, 80, 90, 1975 In which year did UNESCO publish the Education for All EFA Declaration emphasizing inclusive education 1994, 2000, 2010, 1990 The Right of Children to Free and Compulsory Education Act RTE was enacted in India in which year 2002, 5, 9, 12 শুদ্ধ উত্তৰ 9 The concept of Universal Design for Learning UDL was first formalized in which year 1995, 2000, 2004 শুদ্ধ উত্তৰ 2000 Next, in which year was the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities CRPD adopted by the United Nations 1995, 2000, 2006, 2010, 2006 Next, when was the Education for All Handicapped Children Act passed in the United States, which later evolved into IDEA? 1965, 97, 1975, 1985. শুদ্ধ উত্তৰ 1975. Next, the Dhaka Framework for Action, which reaffirmed the global commitment to inclusive education, was adopted in which year? 1994, 2000, 2005, 2010, 2000. In which year did India ratify the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, UNCRPD, 2006, 7, 8, 9, 2007? When was the Persons with Disabilities Equal Opportunities Protection of Rights and Full Participation Act passed in India? 1995, 1995, 2005 to 2010, 1995. Which of the following is not a feature of inclusive education? তলৰ কোনটো inclusive educationৰ feature নহয়? Celebrating diversity in the classroom, segregating students based on their abilities, providing equal opportunities for all learners, promoting participation and reducing exclusion, segregating students based on their abilities to নহয়. One key feature of inclusive education is what? Direct উত্তৰলৈ যাওঁ Flexible teaching methods tailored to diverse needs.